There are some crimes so dark, so strange, that the police, the media, and even history itself seem to try and forget them. These are the stories you were never supposed to hear. We all know the famous names that flash across our screens. But the true horror isn't always in the stories that are told over and over again. It's in the silence. It's in the cases that leave behind nothing but questions and a cold feeling that you can't quite shake. Today, we're opening the files on some of the most disturbing crimes that have been lost to time. Cases that are still waiting for an answer. And you'll find that the truth is often much weirder and much scarier than any story you've ever been told. The farm where silence fell, Hinterkaifeck. Imagine a small farm deep in the countryside, miles away from the nearest town. It's 1922 in Bavaria, Germany. The world is still healing from a great war. Life is simple, hard, and quiet. This farm is called Hinterkaifeck. The name itself means behind the woods. It's isolated, surrounded by trees, a little world of its own. Living there was the Gruber family. There was the old man, Andreas Gruber, who was 63, and his wife, Cecilia, who was 72. They were known as tough, unsocial people. They didn't have many friends and were not well liked in the nearby village. With them lived their daughter, Victoria Gabriel, a 35-year-old widow. Her husband had died in the war. Victoria had two small children, 7-year-old Cecilia and 2-year-old Josef. There were ugly rumors in the village that little Josef's father was actually his own grandfather, Andreas. Finally, there was the new maid, Maria Baumgartner. The last maid had quit suddenly, telling people the farm was haunted. She said she heard footsteps in the attic and strange voices, and she ran away, terrified. For the Gruber family, that fear was just beginning. In the days leading up to the end of March 1922, strange things started happening. Andreas Gruber told his neighbors about them. He found a set of footprints in the fresh snow, leading from the forest to the farmhouse, but there were no footprints leading away. It was as if someone had walked to their home and simply vanished into the walls. Later, he heard footsteps coming from the attic. He grabbed his rifle and searched the entire house, top to bottom. He found nothing. He didn't call the police. He tried to handle it himself. That was the last mistake he would ever make. On the evening of March 31st, something terrible happened. The next few days, nobody saw the Grubers. Little Cecilia didn't show up for school. The family didn't show up for church on Sunday. This was unusual. By April 4th, the neighbors were worried enough to check on them. A small group of men walked to the isolated farm. The place was eerily quiet. The dog was barking inside the barn, and the cows were mooing, clearly hungry. They called out for the Grubers, but only silence answered. They decided to look in the barn. When they pushed open the big wooden doors, the smell of hay and animals hit them. But there was another smell too. Something metallic. Something wrong. Lying on the floor, covered by some hay, were 4 bodies. It was Andreas, his wife Kazelia, his daughter Victoria, and the little girl, 7-year-old Kazelia. They had been killed in a brutal way. Their heads smashed in. It looked like they had been led into the barn one by one, from the house to their deaths. The horror didn't end there. The search party then went into the house. In a bedroom, they found the new maid, Maria, dead in her bed. In another room, in his little cot, was 2-year-old Josef. He had been killed just like the others. The weapon they later found was a mattock, a type of pickaxe that was kept on the farm. 6 people, 3 generations of a family, wiped out in one night. Here's where the story takes a turn that is almost too strange to believe. When the police investigated, they found that the killer, or killers, did not just kill and run. They stayed. ... For several days after the murders, someone was living in the house with the dead bodies. The police found that the cows had been fed. The dog had been cared for. Someone had eaten food in the kitchen and had slept in one of the beds. Imagine that. A person commits this horrible act, then calmly decides to stay for the weekend. They tended to the farm, cooked meals, and lived there, while the family they murdered lay just a few feet away in the barn and in their beds. This fact alone makes the crime one of the most chilling in history. It wasn't a robbery. A lot of money was found untouched in the house. It wasn't a simple act of anger. It was something else entirely. Something cold and calculated. The investigation was a huge challenge. In the 1920s, police didn't have the technology we have today. There was no DNA testing. They looked at the crime scene, but it had already been disturbed by the neighbors who found the bodies. They interviewed over 100 suspects from the village and beyond, but nothing ever stuck. Theory 1. The ex-husband. Many thought Victoria's husband, Carl Gabriel, might not have died in the war. Maybe he came back to find his wife had a new baby, Joseph, with her own father. In a fit of jealous rage, he could have killed them all. Some of his old army friends even said he had talked about coming back, but his body was officially identified by his fellow soldiers in France. Was it a mistake? Could he have switched identities with another soldier? It's a theory that's hard to prove or disprove. Theory 2. A robbery gone wrong. The police first thought it was a robbery. But as I said, a large amount of cash was found in the house, completely untouched. If someone was there for money, they did a terrible job of finding it. Plus, staying for days after the crime doesn't fit with a simple thief's actions. Theory 3. A local feud. The Gruber family, especially the father Andreas, was not popular. He was known to be a difficult and abusive man. The rumors about him and his daughter, Victoria, were terrible. Maybe someone in the village had a deep hatred for him. Lorenz Schlittenbauer, a neighbor who had a relationship with Victoria and even thought he was Josef's father, was a prime suspect for a while. He was one of the men who discovered the bodies, and he acted strangely at the scene, moving the bodies around. But the police could never find enough evidence to charge him. Theory 4. The unknown stranger. This is perhaps the most frightening idea. The footprints in the snow, the missing keys, the newspaper. These all point to a stranger, a wanderer who stumbled upon the farm. Maybe this person was hiding in the attic for days, watching the family, learning their routines. Then, when the time was right, they came down and committed the horrible act. This theory explains why no one in the village could figure out who did it. The killer came from the woods and vanished back into them, leaving behind a ghost story that was all too real. Years went by. The police file grew thicker, but the case grew colder. The farm was eventually torn down in 1923, less than a year after the murders. They said it was haunted, and no one wanted to live there. All that's left today is a small monument in a field where the house once stood. The 6 bodies of the Gruber family were buried, but their skulls were sent to Munich for examination. During the chaos of World War II, the skulls were lost. So even in death, the family was not left in peace. The case of the Hinterkaifeck murders is still officially open. It's a dark spot in German history, a story that people whisper about. A reminder that sometimes evil doesn't have a clear face or a simple motive. Sometimes it just appears out of the woods, does something terrible, and disappears again, leaving only silence behind. The day the sun went out, the Beaumont children. Let's travel forward in time and across the world to Australia, 1966. It's a place of sunshine, beaches, and a feeling of safety. People didn't lock their doors back then. Kids played outside from morning until night, and parents didn't worry. It was a more innocent time. But on one hot summer day, that innocence was shattered forever. This is the story of the Beaumont children. Jane was the oldest, at 9 years old. She was the responsible one. Arna was 7, a bit more of a free spirit. And little Grant was only 4. On January 26th, Australia Day, the 3 of them wanted to go to Glenelg Beach, a popular spot near their home in Adelaide. It was only a 5-minute bus ride away. Their mother, Nancy, was a bit hesitant to let them go alone. But Jane was a sensible girl, and they had done the trip before. Nancy gave Jane some money for the bus fare and for some snacks. She told them to be home by noon. They waved goodbye, 3 happy kids in their summer clothes, excited for a day at the beach. They were never seen again. When noon came and went, Nancy started to worry. By 2 p.m., she was getting frantic. She and her husband Jim went to the beach to look for them. They searched everywhere, calling their names. It was as if the crowded beach had just swallowed them up. They went to the police, and one of the biggest missing person searches in Australian history began. The police started to piece together the children's last known movements. Several people remembered seeing them at the beach. They were playing under the sprinklers, happy and carefree. But then, witnesses reported something worrying. They said the children were with a man. He was described as tall, thin, with blondish hair and a sun-tanned face. He was in his mid-30s. Witnesses said the kids seemed comfortable with him. They were laughing and playing with him. He even bought them snacks at a local bakery. The shop owner remembered it clearly. Jane paid for some pastries with a £1 note, but their mother had only given them coins. Where did Jane get that money? The chilling answer seemed to be from the strange man. A last credible sighting of the 3 children was around 3 p.m. A local postman who knew the family saw Jane, Arna, and Grant walking alone away from the beach, heading towards their home. They seemed happy, he said. He even waved at them, but they never made it home. That 3-kilometer walk was the last journey they ever took. The police believed that the man from the beach must have met them on their way home and taken them. He had spent hours earning their trust, playing with them, buying them treats. He was a predator, patiently waiting for his moment. The search was massive. Police, soldiers, and regular people searched every building, park, and body of water. The case was on the front page of every newspaper in the country. The faces of Jane, Arna, and Grant were everywhere. Beck. In the afternoon of December 15th, 2022, the whole country was holding its breath, praying for them to be found safe. But days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The hope began to fade, replaced by a terrible, gnawing dread. This case changed Australia. The carefree attitude was gone. Parents who used to let their kids play freely now held them close. Stranger danger became a real, terrifying concept. The story of the Beaumont children became a cautionary tale, a parent's worst nightmare come to life. The investigation was filled with false leads and cruel hoaxes. The letters. About a year after the children disappeared, their parents received 2 letters. One was supposedly from Jane, and the other was from the man who claimed to have them. The letters said the children were fine, and that he had been chosen as their guardian. He even said he would be willing to hand them back. The parents and the police were told to go to a designated meeting spot. But it was a trap. The place was swarming with media and police, and of course, no one showed up. A 3rd letter arrived, saying that because they had involved the police, the man would now keep the children forever. For years, Nancy and Jim Beaumont believed the letters were real. It matched a 41-year-old man who was just a teenager at the time and had written the letters as a sick joke. That last bit of hope was cruelly snatched away. the psychic. A famous psychic from the Netherlands, Gerard Croiset, was brought in to help with the case. He claimed he had a vision. He said that children's bodies were buried under a new building, very close to their home. The public and media went into a frenzy. People donated money, and the owners of the building agreed to let it be searched. They dug up the concrete floor, but they found nothing. It was another dead end. Another wave of disappointment for the heartbroken parents. Over the years, dozens of suspects have been investigated. Police have dug up properties all over the country based on tips. Many serial killers and dangerous criminals have been questioned about the Beaumont children, but none have ever been definitively linked to the crime. Jim and Nancy Beaumont stayed in their house for decades, always hoping that one day their children would come home. They never changed the locks. They never changed their phone number. Nancy passed away in 2019. Jim is still alive, an old man now, who has lived most of his life under the shadow of that terrible day. He will likely go to his grave without ever knowing what happened to his 3 beautiful children. The Beaumont case remains open. It's a deep wound in the Australian consciousness. A story about a day the sun shone brightly, but a dark cloud appeared that has never, ever left. The man who wasn't there. The Tom and Shud case. Some mysteries are not about who did it, but about who it was done to. Our next story is one of the strangest unsolved cases of all time. It's a puzzle box of spies, secret codes, and a man who seems to have come from nowhere. It all starts on a beach at dawn. The date is December 1st, 1948. The place is Somerton Park Beach, just outside of Adelaide, Australia, the same city as the Beaumont case. A man is found lying in the sand, his head propped up against a seawall. He's dressed nicely in a suit and tie. He looks like he could be sleeping, but he's not. He's dead. When the police arrive, things immediately start to get weird. There is no sign of a struggle. The man has no injuries. An autopsy is done, and the doctors are stumped. They suspect he was poisoned with something rare and hard to trace, but they can't prove it. His last meal was a pasty, a type of meat pie, but it wasn't the cause of death. His heart was congested, and his spleen was 3 times its normal size, but the doctors couldn't say for sure what killed him. It was as if he had just stopped. The next problem was figuring out who he was. They checked his pockets. He had a few common items: a train ticket to the beach he was found on, a bus ticket, a comb, some chewing gum. But there was no wallet, no money, no identification of any kind. Even stranger, all the labels on his clothes had been carefully cut off. Someone had gone to a lot of trouble to make sure this man could not be identified. His fingerprints were run through every database in Australia, and then around the world. No match. His photograph was put in newspapers and on television. Nobody recognized him. He was a complete ghost. They called him the Somerton Man, the mystery only deepened. A month and a half after he was found, the staff at the Adelaide railway station found a brown suitcase that had been checked into the cloakroom on November 30th, the day before the man was found. The police suspected it might belong to him. Inside, they found more clothes, all with the labels cut off. But there was one clue. On a tie, a laundry bag, and a singlet, they found the name T. Keene, or Keene, written. The police searched everywhere for a missing person with that name, but they found nothing. It seemed to be another dead end. But then, the words were Persian, and they meant, "It is ended," or "It is finished." They were the final words from a famous collection of poems called the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. This was a huge breakthrough. The police now believed the Somerton man had owned a very specific copy of this book, torn this tiny scrap of paper from it, and put it in his secret pocket before he died. It was like a final message. The police put out a call to the public. Has anyone found a copy of the Rubaiyat with the last page torn out? A man came forward. He said that right after the Somerton man was found, he had found a rare copy of the book in the back of his unlocked car, which he had parked near Somerton Beach. He hadn't thought anything of it at the time. He gave the book to the police, and when they examined it, they confirmed it. The last page with the words Tamam Shud was missing. The paper from the man's pocket was a perfect match. This was already strange enough to be a movie plot, but it was about to get even crazier. Inside the back cover of the book, written in pencil, were 5 lines of capital letters. It looked like a code. WRGOABAD MILIA WTBINT Ittim Sam Stegub. Top code breakers from the military were brought in to look at it. They studied it for weeks. They said it wasn't a simple code. It was complex, maybe a one-time pad cipher, which is almost impossible to break without a key. To this day, the code has never been cracked. What secret was so important that it had to be hidden in a code that experts couldn't solve? But there was one more clue in the book. Faintly written next to the code was a phone number. It belonged to a woman named Jessica Thompson. She was a nurse who lived very close to where the Somerton man was found. When the police went to talk to her, she acted very strangely. They showed her a plaster cast that had been made of the man's face. She looked at it and seemed absolutely shocked, almost like she was going to faint. But she denied everything. She told the police she had no idea who the man was. She said she had never seen him before in her life. The police felt she was lying, but they couldn't prove it. She seemed terrified. Jessica Thompson told them that years earlier, she had owned a copy of the Rubaiyat. She said she had given it as a gift to a man she knew, a soldier named Alfred Boxall. For a moment, the police thought they had solved it. The Somerton man must be Alfred Boxall, but when they tracked him down, they found him alive and well, living in Sydney. and he still had the copy of the book Jessica had given him, complete with the last page and the words, "Tamam Shud." So who was the man on the beach? Why did he have Jessica's phone number? Why did she react so strongly to seeing his face? And what was the meaning of the unbreakable code? For decades, theories have swirled around this case. The spy theory. This is the most popular one. The time was 1948, the beginning of the Cold War. There was a secret weapons testing site not far from Adelaide. Was the Somerton man a spy? Maybe from the Soviet Union? Was he here to meet a contact, pass on secret information in code? But something went wrong? Was he poisoned by his enemies? Or did he take his own life to avoid being captured? This theory explains the untraceable poison, the cut-off labels, and the secret code. It would also explain why Jessica Thompson was so scared. If she was involved in espionage, she would have denied knowing him to protect herself. The jilted lover theory. Another idea is that it was a love story gone wrong. Maybe the Somerton man was Jessica's secret lover. Maybe he was the father of her son. When she ended the relationship, he came to see her one last time, then took his own life on the beach nearby, leaving the book with the code as a final, dramatic message to her. This could explain her strange reaction, but it doesn't quite explain the extreme secrecy, the cut-off labels, and the military-grade code. Jessica Thompson took her secrets to the grave. Her family said she could speak Russian, but never told them where she learned it. Her own daughter believes she was a spy. She also believes the Somerton man was her half-brother's father. For over 70 years, the Somerton man lay in a grave with a simple headstone. Here lies the unknown man who was found at Somerton Beach. But the story isn't quite over. In 2021, his body was exhumed. Scientists are now using modern DNA technology to try and finally give him a name. In 2022, a researcher named Derek Abbott claimed he had used DNA to identify the man as Carl Charles Webb, an electrical engineer from Melbourne. However, this identification has not yet been officially confirmed by the police. Even if his name is Webb, it only answers one question. It doesn't tell us why he was there, what the code means, or how he died. The case of the Somerton man is a perfect mystery. A story of a man who walked out of the shadows, left behind an impossible puzzle, and then disappeared forever, leaving us with only two final words: Tamam Shud.